Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee for Monday, January 22nd, 2018. I'm Paul Krikorian, joined by my colleagues, Mr. Blumenfield and Mr. Bonin, and we're ready to begin with today's agenda. Members, just to give you advance notice, I would have recommended items 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, and 11 for consent, but we do have cards on each of those matters. So we'll be resolving those after we take the public comment. So we're going to 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, and 11. 9 and 12 will be regular agenda items held for further discussion. We have one speaker who has submitted on multiple items under multiple names. That's Wayne from Encino. So, Mr. Spindler, come up. You can speak on all items for 2 minutes. Stick to the agenda items. General public comment will be reserved till the end of the meeting.
Okay.
2 minutes.
So, number one, dangerous condition, fuck the city. Settle it. Number two, the city of Los Angeles versus the CRA. Fuck the CRA. We don't have to pay them. They're out of business, right? I got a text today from attorney Armando Herman that says, pay it, bitch.
That's irrelevant to the agenda.
And then number three, the Water Resources Board. We just discussed it in the Claims Board. We were all there having a nice conversation about the Hyperion water treatment plant putting AIDS-infested needles into the ocean. It's got to stop. Thank you, Water Quality Control Board, for fucking this city and getting Hyperion back into compliance. Number four, the Water Resources Control Board does it again. The Los Angeles Waterkeeper is fighting the Water Resources Board. What do? They don't do shit. It's a tie. Therefore, it goes to the winner. Thank you, Water Resources Board. Then we have outside service contracts for the attorneys. Thank you, everybody that's suing the city. Thank you, Michael Hunt. Thank you, Wayne Spindler. Thank you again, Wayne Spindler. Thank you again, Wayne Spindler. 3 for him alone. I'm about to kick your ass in the 2nd District Court of Appeals. Thank you. They need outside counsel.
Not on the agenda today.
Just make sure that you say the magic words. Karuki vra Ireli. That means that Paul Krikorian is a faggot piece of shit. Make sure they pay $9,000 an hour. Fuck you.
All right. Members, as I said earlier, I would propose approval of items 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, and 11. If there's no objection, that will be the action of the committee, and that will take us into our closed session items. We'll begin. City Attorney requested item number 1 for priority. Is that okay? We'll go ahead and take item number 1 first, please. Good afternoon. Thank you for your patience. We're back in open session now and taking up item number 9.
Pardon me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
We do have to read the action that committee took on item number 4.
Oh, okay.
On item number 4, the committee approved the city attorney report relative to the retention of outside counsel in the litigation matter entitled Los Angeles Waterkeeper versus California State Water Resources Control Board et al., Los Angeles Superior Court, case, numbers BS 171009, BS 171010, BS 171011, and BS 171012.
Very good. Thank you very much. And let's go ahead and read in item number 9, please.
Item number 9 is the Chief Legislative Analyst and CAO reports relative to fiscal year 2016 staffing for adequate fire emergency response, or SAFER, grant awards. The Public Safety and Personnel and Animal Welfare Committees waived consideration of this item.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Matthias Freifan with the Chief Legislative Analyst's Office.
Al Poyer, Chief Deputy Emergency Operations for the Fire Department.
And as stated, we're here to report on the CLA report dated January 16th regarding the Safer Grant Award. This item was heard by Public Safety Committee on January 10th. There was the CAO report that was discussed at that time. As a result of that discussion, our office was instructed to report back on ways to change the way that the grant was implemented, perhaps a way to bring down the general fund cost. We have reported back on that. The report details the differences between the CLA's estimated cost for the grant over the next 3 years versus what was reported in the Public Safety Committee. At the end, the Fire Department has been awarded a SAFER grant, which is a 3-year grant. The total amount for the grant is $25.1 million over the next 3 years, which is the maximum. The cost sharing for that amount would be approximately 60% for federal. The city would have to contribute 40% of that. Fire Department on their application indicated that with these additional resources of 48 positions, it would like to restore 4 engine companies. Our report on the attachment outlines the dollar amounts associated with restoring those engine companies as well as the 48 new positions. If the city does accept the grant and hires the 48 new positions, and as a result of that upgrades 24 existing positions to restore the 4 engine companies, the 3-year cost for that would be $32.1 million, of which the city contribution would approximately be $18.3 million, and the federal contribution would be $13.8 million. The reason for that is that the federal grant would only cover the cost of the 48 new positions, and it would only cover the fringe benefits for those new positions and the salaries. It would not cover the constant staffing overtime that's associated with those positions. And again, if you go to the attachment, Table 1 of the attachment provides the cost sharing that would be between the city and the federal government for the 48 positions over the 3-year grant period. Table 2 provides the constant staffing that's associated with those 48 new positions over the next 3 years. Table 3 provides the incremental cost that would be incurred by the city to upgrade 24 existing positions in order to restore the engine companies. Table 4 is simply just a grand total of all those costs. And Table 4B, which is the bottom table, just translates those costs into fiscal years. The grant period does go from January 22nd to January 21st every year, which is inconsistent with the city's fiscal year. So Table 4D does translate that into fiscal year cost, which would begin in the current year and then go all the way to 2021. Something that should be noted about the grant is that the purpose of the grant is to increase the number of sworn positions, not full-time equivalents. So as part of the grant, the fire department did submit a list of current operational positions, of sworn positions, which total 2,711. If you add these 48, then it would be the new staffing maintenance number is what they're calling it, would be 2,759 operational staff positions. And the city would be obligated to maintain that number of operational staff positions over the life of the grant. So if at a future date within that grant period, the city wanted to reduce the count of operational staff positions, we'd have to discuss that with the grantor. It would be something that may not be allowed. Also, if we wanted to somehow offset the cost another way, we would be restricted within that grant period. So that's just something that should be highlighted. Our report does indicate that if it is a city high priority to restore these engine companies, this grant would offset the cost of doing that. And again, if it's a 3-year grant, that would impact 4 fiscal years. If you have any questions regarding that, I'm here to answer any questions. Fire department's here to answer any questions regarding the operations of the department.
Okay. Mr. Blumenfield?
Well, I'm thrilled about this grant. I've been waiting for years for us to get this SAFER grant, particularly for Engine Company 73 in Reseda, which has been always the next one that was going to get funded and going to get funded and so finally to see that funded is really important because that's been a safety issue. So I know it's going to create a little bit more financial liability for us, but I think as a policy we wanted to staff up the fire department. So I'm very comfortable with that personally. Just a question, though, in terms of, what the impact, with the current president of the United States and the irrationality that's happening in Washington and possibilities of, threats about immigration policy and yanking money. Is there any danger in this grant, or do we, once we accept it, do we contractually have it for the 3 years, or could there be some sort of clawback that the current president and his associates could do out of spite or for other reasons?
I don't know if fire department wants to cover that, but.
I mean, it's impossible for me to really speculate about that. Maybe Ms. Gibson will comment on that.
Yeah.
Well, I know we can't predict what they're going to do. I'm just wondering what's written into because we typically have more protections if the contract is real clear about it than if there's federal discretion in any way over the next 3 years.
There's always going to be some risk. This will be the least of our problems if there is any clawback of any federal funding. This is a small amount in comparison to some of the other grants that we are receiving from the federal government. Given that this is a public safety grant, there may be a little bit more protection in this one. I would probably be more concerned about some of our block grant funding and that type of grant.
I am concerned about that.
So there's always some risk.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, related to that, how is the money received? Is it received retroactively as reimbursement for
Yes.
expenses that have already been incurred?
Yes.
Okay. So, and in how many payments? How often does that get doled out?
I think I would defer.
Annually, or?
Yeah, I think it's probably more quarterly, but I would defer to the fire department on that.
We can actually seek reimbursements on a monthly basis, and that's what our intention is. But how quickly they actually disperse the payments to us, is kind of an open question. I think FEMA in the past has been pretty responsive when we've sought reimbursements, and we usually get reimbursements within a 60 to 90-day period. But, our plan is to seek reimbursements every monthly.
So that seems to reduce some of that risk too. It's money that's already out. We're being reimbursed for what we've already spent, and we're doing it on a periodic basis. So it's always a concern every time money's coming from Washington. How is this particular deployment model and the particular engine companies selected? What went into that process?
Well, we considered call volume, response times, community risk. These 4 engine companies have been talked about for an extended period of time because it goes, this particular grant goes a long ways towards restoring engine companies that were lost as a result of the reduction in assets and resources in the 2011 reduction in our force. Engine 73, Engine 75, Engine 20, and Engine 1 were at stations that all lost engine companies. They were there for a reason. The call volume for the city has continued to go up over the past 5 years, measurably. And so what you see is an increase in activity and workload at those stations in those areas. And we're starting to see, those stations get calls, and then the district goes empty, and then you get a cross-in from another district. And we considered the types of occupancies in the districts, for example, in Echo Park. We considered the call volume in that area. We also considered the extraordinary call volume in the Reseda area. We considered the resources from Fire Station 75 in Granada Hills that go northbound on the 5 freeway, cross the 210, and have to go all the way up into the Santa Clarita Valley to turn around. They're out of their district for an hour, puts that community at risk without another resource in that station. The same thing in Lincoln Heights, where you see the light force, the truck and the 200 series engine at that station goes to a small grass fire or goes on a call on the 5 freeway there in that area and is out of that district for an extended period of time. It puts them at risk not having that other resource.
Yeah, and that makes sense. It's just that this is in the context of 6 or so years of the council asking the department for a long-term plan for service restoration that has been held up because of a lack of a standards of cover report, et cetera, and merely refilling what was cut, whether it's in the order in which it was cut or otherwise, is not getting us that information that we've been asking for nearly as long as I've been on the council. This is a high priority for all of us, I know, and all of our colleagues to get service restoration. But essentially, this grant is allowing us to expedite what we want to do anyway, I think, and that's helpful. But I just hope it's not getting us too far ahead of ourselves in the current evaluation for 2018 and the decade to follow about where our needs are going to be, where we can have the most cost-effective impact on response times, how is the call volume changing, what areas are impinged by geographical boundaries or political boundaries, and so on. All of those sorts of factors that, you know, we thought we were considering, what was it, 5 years ago or so when we did the last response time analysis and redeployment proposal. So I'm all for going full speed ahead, but I also want to make sure that we're going full speed ahead in the methodical, clear plan and vision for how we complete that service restoration.
And we appreciate that. And Chief Terrazas is very cognizant of that. We are moving full steam ahead on the Standards of Cover project. It'll be implemented and accomplished in the next fiscal year, 18-19. The department and our labor organization, we've agreed to establish a team to develop that Standards of Cover. We're in the process of building that team out right now. And beginning at the earliest part of this fiscal year, we'll start to develop that Standards of Cover, and we'll deliver it in the next year. That'll give us a better perspective on, as we restore resources, the best place to do that for utilization of those resources.
Terrific. Thank you. Now, I know there's a number of different deployment options that we might consider that would fall within the context of this grant funding. So is the proposal that's before us today one that is, and I know the fire department might want to consider different options than maybe are specified in here, but is this something that that the department is prepared to move forward with right away and agrees to?
We considered a number of options, and I don't know if Ms. Gibson wants to comment on that. We considered a number of different fiscal options,
right,
of resource options, and there are limitations within the grant parameters of the type of resource that we can request. As the council knows, 85% of the time we go out the door in the fire department, there's an emergency medical services component to that. But in that, all of our firefighters, all of our officers, all of the resources that we hire have that training. We have a number of firefighters that have paramedic licensure. Everybody has an EMT licensure, and they do handle the BLS basic life support type calls. So we did consider fast response vehicles. We considered advanced practitioner response units. We considered a number of assets, but there are limits and parameters within the grant guidelines that allowed us to arrive at what we thought was the best option for utilizing these funds and bringing resources back.
And presumably, if we're using these funds for 48 new firefighters getting trained in the tower right now, I think, right, as of this week, that gives the department greater latitude in redeploying maybe existing resources in different ways that might be able to address some of those different call requirements, I assume. And it's dollars are fungible at the end of the day. These are in fact 48 new firefighter positions, but maybe some of our existing firefighters could be put on different vehicles and so on, if that's the case.
We're certainly exploring every option, but these 48 positions that we're talking about in this grant will go to restoring these four engine companies, and then we're constantly reevaluating the deployment of our resources through utilizing data to see if we transport 610 people to the hospital every day, what council district or what geographic battalion do we transport them from at what time of the day, and allows us to move those resources around and to place personnel, like you said, on the appropriate resource for the appropriate geographical area, yes.
Great. Now, these are new positions. At the end of the grant period, we stopped getting federal funding. So we're carrying a burden, a career-long financial obligation for these new positions, but we're only guaranteed the grant funding for the 3 years. but is it typical that these get renewed if everything is going right, or are they sporadic, these grants?
This grant is, the grant performance period for this grant is 3 years, and once that funding is provided to us at the federal level, that contribution, there is no additional funding.
There wouldn't be any further obligation on the city to maintain the staffing for the 48 positions. So we would have those additional 48 if at that time, after the grant term expires, if the city were to decide not to continue at that higher 48 position level, then that could be absorbed through attrition,
Right.
through reducing the number of people going through the Gerald Tower in that year.
But is it typical, though, that once you're a member of the Safer Grant Club, that you stay in that club and you continue to get future funding, or is it just kind of one-shot deals? Or do we know? Since we haven't gotten one, maybe this is new to us, but have other jurisdictions gotten renewals of these things?
Yes, other jurisdictions have been much more fortunate than the city. As you know, this is the first time that the city has received the grant. On the plus side, first year, it's also the highest amount that was awarded to any city in the nation. So obviously, the department is planning on continuing to apply in future years, and we, of course, will get input from the council offices, relative to how the staffing for the next grant should be allocated. But, we've applied 13 years in a row, lucky number 13. But, we're hoping in future years that we'll be as fortunate as we were this year.
Okay, great. Mr. Bonner?
Glad to see the engine company being restored. I was lucky 69 came on board a year and a half ago. Desperately needed. Just want to commend the folks who worked on this year. Also, I know UFLAC, IAFF worked really hard on this grant as well. So just thanks to everybody.
All right. Any other questions, concerns? All right. Seeing no others, it will be the action of the committee to approve the CLA recommendations as contained in the report.
And Mr. Chair, we'd like to make an amendment to that. There was an action taken by the council on Friday to approve 2 of the recommendations already contained in our report. So we would recommend that those 2 recommendations be removed from our report. That would be recommendation number 2CI, as well as recommendation number 4.
Okay. So with those amendments, it'll be the action of the committee to approve the CLA's recommendations. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Good work. All right, that brings us then to our final item, item number 12.
Item number 12 is the motion, West Krikorian, relative to a proposed bid for the City of Los Angeles to host the 2026 Federation Internationale de Football Association FIFA World Cup soccer competition.
Good afternoon.
Good
Thanks for your
afternoon.
patience.
Yes, John Wickham with the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst, and Ernie Wooden with the Los Angeles Tourism and Convention Board, or Bureau? Bureau. Okay. So in front of you is a motion that would instruct the CLA to evaluate and report back with information concerning the bid for Los Angeles to be the host city for the 2026 World Cup. We've done some, the CAO, City Attorney, CLA have been doing some initial reviews of the material. We have a lot of questions. There's a lot of information we need to still work on to get a full understanding of how this application works and what it means to be a host city. It turns out with this particular bid, it's more of a North American bid. Canada, Mexico, and the United States are all going forward together. And there are something like 32 cities in the United States alone that are going in as host cities. Unlike the Olympics, where one city is a host city and you're responsible for all of the events, in this case, there's each city is a host city for the events that happen in that city. And it's likely that Los Angeles might have 1 game, 2 games, maybe 4 games. And that would be our role of responsibility as a host city. We would not be responsible for all 80 games. So it's very different from the Olympics. It's more like a Super Bowl is the comparison that the Sports Commission has offered. And adoption of the motion would instruct city staff to evaluate. In the meantime, the bid moving forward is looking for an entity to step up and represent the Los Angeles area. And the Tourism Bureau, Ernie, has a proposal that will allow Los Angeles to stay in the bid process and represent the complexity of Los Angeles is always going to be different, right? We've got Pasadena, Inglewood, and Los Angeles all have stadiums. There are actually three components to the bid. There's the big stadiums for the main events. There are training facilities that are required, and there's a fan event. And so they're assigned in different ways based on how the bid kind of comes out in the end, and that's not known today what it's actually going to be. So the Tourism Bureau has come up with a plan that allows us to move forward at this time, allows us to do our analysis of the costs, the liabilities, the revenues, any other issues that might be in place, such as security, et cetera, and buys us basically some time to figure all of that out, because the bid does need to go forward within the next couple of weeks. So I'm available to answer any questions. Ernie's available to answer any questions if you...
Yeah, so the bid itself is not going to include any kind of obligation like the host city contract did for the Olympics, where we signed on the dotted line and we were making irrevocable financial commitments, right? I mean, there's nothing like that in participating in this.
At the end of the day, there is, and we're not recommending signing anything like that at this point because we don't understand the implications of the costs, the liabilities, et cetera. So we would not recommend signing anything at this point. All this is saying is go analyze it and report back to council. In the meantime, there's a way for us to stay in the bid process and move forward, and it makes sense because we've got these three other cities. We've got 3 cities total from the Los Angeles region. There needs to be more meat on these bones before anybody puts their name down on a contract.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember in '94 whether we did have Coliseum events, didn't we? There was a Rose Bowl. There were a couple of Rose Bowl games, I think, but I don't remember whether there was a game in the Coliseum.
We actually have the man who ran the games in the audience, Alan Rothenberg. Can you answer that question?
Oh, hello, Alan. I'm so sorry. Come on up.
In '94, there were, I think, 7 games at the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
None at the Coliseum, but we used the convention center for a 10-day fan festival.
I see.
And one of the contemplations this time is a 30-day, for the length of the tournament, fan festival where we'll set up opportunities for fans to watch it on big screen television and kind of have a nice celebration, even if the game's not in our city.
Okay. So, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because we're still at the beginning of this, but just kind of thinking out loud, it sounds like this is more of a venue agreement situation with the organizing committee than it is a city hosting agreement like the Olympics is.
Until that unified bid committee decides who to recommend to host what games, we don't know. At the time that they do, and we hope we'll get some of the top games, then we will be the host city for those matches. But as John indicated, it's more like hopefully a series of Super Bowls than it is a 30-day, or in the case of the Olympics, a 6-week obligation.
Yeah. But to your point, there's a multiplicity of agreements that have got to be entered into. So there's an agreement with the airport, there's agreement with the host city or cities, and there are venue agreements that have got to be entered into. A lot of questions are still out there. The Tourism Board thought it expedient if we be the entity that signs the agreement for now, but we have to expect that over some period of time, which could be in the next 2 years from now, the Tourism Board will be coming back to the appropriate city based upon what we've won to say, this is the agreement the city has got to agree to, the rights and obligations, and whatever the details are at that point. But there are several agreements that must be entered into with FIFA.
Okay. Any Any other, Mr. Blumenfield?
Yeah. So there's also the World Cup headquarters location, the International Broadcasting Center. That's part of this whole process?
Yes.
And we're in the running for that. What other cities are competing with us for that?
I'm not sure about that. There's 32 cities that have indicated an interest in hosting games, but I'm not sure about the broadcast and media centers.
And then if we do take on those kind of obligations, does that guarantee us other things on the other end, like actually getting the matches played in L.A. and not just in Inglewood and Rose Bowl and Carson?
I think, yeah, the answer would be yes. The more opportunity we have, the more we'll take advantage of. But as Ernie can tell you, that even if the matches are played in Inglewood or Pasadena, the hotels and most of the other activities are going to be in the city of Los Angeles. And so we will get the primary financial benefit out of those games, regardless of where they're played. And the Fan Festival is a great opportunity for revenue for the city as well.
And how do they decide which city to choose for these?
The process is as follows. In June is when FIFA will decide if this unified bid is successful. After that, and that's why Ernie said it might be up to 2 years, that bid committee is going to sit there and try to sort out among the 32 cities where it makes the most sense to recommend games be played. And so there's going to be a negotiating process between ourselves as well as the other cities and the bid committee. And it's inconceivable that they won't have major matches in the Los Angeles area. Our complication is what we've talked about is we've got 3 different stadiums in the area, and which one, if or more of those, are they going to pick? But if I had to guess, major matches are going to be in New York and Los Angeles, regardless of what other cities they pick. And of course, Los Angeles, and in this case, has been the Rose Bowl. Historically, has been the site of the Olympic Championship, the '94 World Cup Championship, and the '99 Women's World Cup Championship. So it's been the place that FIFA's always come, and I can't imagine that they wouldn't again.
By the way, to add to that, by June of this year, the decision that FIFA is going to make is whether this joint consortium of the U.S., Mexico, and Canada will be the winners of the 2026, or the country of Morocco. So you can appreciate some of the political cross currents that are going on right now.
Yeah.
With 280 some odd voters, I believe it is, in FIFA. But hopefully, cooler heads will prevail, and the United States and its partners will win. And then the negotiations for about a dozen cities to host up to 60 games will begin. That's going to take us some time. But as that evolves, we'll get more clarity around the rights and obligations of the host city or cities, as well as the venues themselves, airports, et cetera. So what we're doing is just giving us a little bit more time to kind of work through a lot of the questions that everybody has in the country, and that'll be clarified hopefully over the short period of the next year and a half.
On the bid committee, the big one, is there a LA representative on there, or who actually runs that?
It's a joint effort of the United States Soccer Federation, the Mexican Soccer Federation, and the Canadian Soccer Federation. The executive committee, it consists of the presidents of each of those 3 organizations. The person that's running it day to day is a gentleman with offices in New York who had been involved in many World Cups, and he was involved in our bid when we were unsuccessful in 2022. It's a pretty skeleton crew at this point.
Anything? Okay. If there's no objection, then we'll go ahead and approve this item. And so going forward, John, what do you anticipate in terms of reporting back?
We should probably wait until, after June, find out if the bid's going to come forward. In the meantime, we'll be moving forward and figuring out some of the implications in all of these areas. So.
Perfect. All right. Without objection, then, that will be the action of the committee. And the only remaining item before us, I think, is general public comment. We have no general public comment cards.
Just, I believe, one from Mr. Spindler.
And Mr. Spindler has been excluded from the meeting, and he is not here. So if there's no other business before the committee, we are adjourned.